The coffee shop on Briar Street was almost empty that Tuesday evening, and Emma Lawson sat in the corner booth, with both hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. She was not drinking it. She was reading the same message from her mother for the 7th time, and each time it landed in her chest like a small stone dropped into still water. Her mother had written that her older sister was bringing her fiancé to Christmas dinner, that her cousin had finally gotten serious with someone wonderful, and that even her younger brother had someone now. Then came the part that stung the most. She had written without any apparent awareness of how deeply it cut, that she hoped Emma would not be coming alone this year because it made everyone at the table feel so awkward, and people were starting to wonder. Emma set the phone face down on the table and looked out the window at the street where the first real snow of December was beginning to settle on the sidewalk. She was 26 years old. She worked the morning shift at a diner called the Blue Kettle and the dinner shift 3 nights a week at an Italian restaurant across town called Rosario. She paid her rent on time, usually. She kept the small studio apartment reasonably clean, and she called her mother every Sunday without fail. She was, by her own private assessment, doing fine. Not spectacularly. Not the way her sister was doing fine with her law degree and her tall fiancé in her apartment that actually had a second bedroom. But fine. The Christmas dinner was in 4 days. She pulled on her coat and walked out into the snow. The park 2 blocks from the coffee shop was quiet at that hour. Just a few people walking dogs and one old man feeding pigeons near the central fountain. Emma walked along the inner path with her hands shoved into her pockets, talking to herself the way she sometimes did when she was working something out. She said quietly that she was not going to survive another Christmas dinner sitting next to her sister and her sister's perfect fiancé, while her mother looked at her with that particular expression that mixed love and worry in a way that somehow felt worse than either one alone. She said that she needed someone to walk in the door with her, just for one evening, just to take the pressure off. She said that she had approximately $11 in her wallet, and that was after buying the cold coffee she had not finished. She did not expect anyone to respond, but a voice behind her said that $11 was enough if she was not too particular about the quality of the help. Emma stopped walking and turned around fast enough that her boot slipped slightly on the wet path. The man standing there was tall, wearing a dark wool coat and a gray scarf, with dark eyes that caught the light from the nearby lamppost. He looked to be somewhere in his early 30s. He had the kind of calm, unhurried expression of someone who had not been embarrassed in a very long time. She said she had not been talking to him. He said he understood that. He said he had been walking behind her for the last half minute and had not intended to listen, but she had been talking at a volume that made that difficult. She asked him what exactly he thought he had heard. He said she needed someone to accompany her to a family dinner for Christmas, and that she had a limited budget. He said his name was Ben, and that he happened to be free on Christmas Eve, and that if she was serious, he would help her. Emma studied him for a long moment. The snow was falling softly and the park was quiet, and the whole situation was strange enough that she felt she was standing slightly outside of it, observing. She told him she had $5, not 11. She said that because after she bought the coffee, there had been the matter of the parking meter 2 days ago, and she just wanted to be clear about what she was actually offering. He said $5 was fine. She asked him if he was serious. He said he was generally a serious person. Emma did not know what exactly moved her to say yes. Perhaps it was the 4 days of dread sitting in her stomach. Perhaps it was the image of her mother's face across the dinner table. Perhaps it was simply that he did not look dangerous and the whole thing felt, in its absurdity, almost like relief. She gave him her number, and they agreed to meet. The next afternoon, to prepare, they met at a small sandwich place on Warren Street and sat across from each other in a booth, and Emma asked him questions the way you quiz someone before an important exam. She asked him what he did for work, and he said he worked in technology. She asked what kind, and he said software, education-focused. She asked where he lived, and he said downtown. She gave him the details of their invented relationship. They had met at the restaurant where she worked. He had come in during a slow Thursday evening, and she had accidentally refilled his water glass 3 times because she was distracted by the table near the window that kept sending food back. He smiled at that. It was a genuine smile, not polished or practiced. And it did something quiet to the air between them. She told him her family details. Her mother Linda was warm and curious and would ask him about his future plans before the appetizers arrived. Her father Gerald was quiet and watchful and would shake his hand very firmly at the door to take his measure. Her sister Carol would find a way to compare everything to how she and her fiancé did things. And her Aunt Patricia, who was technically only related by marriage, would ask within the first 10 minutes how much he paid for his shoes. He listened to all of it without looking overwhelmed. She asked him if he was sure about this. He said he had heard worse things than a family Christmas dinner. On Christmas Eve, he appeared at her door at 7 in the evening, wearing dark trousers and a white shirt and a deep green tie. He was holding a small bouquet of white flowers, and when she opened the door, he said simply that she looked nice. Not beautiful in the theatrical way men sometimes said beautiful when they wanted something. Just nice meaning it. She noticed his car at the curb when they went downstairs. It was sleek and black, and the interior when she sat in it was softer than any seat she had ever been in. She asked him if teachers drove cars like this, and he said something about an old investment, and then changed the subject so smoothly she almost did not notice. Her mother opened the door and saw the flowers and made the sound of a woman who has just received confirmation of something she deeply hoped was true. Her father shook his hand at the door and held it a full 3 seconds, which Emma had learned over her lifetime meant he was considering reserving judgment rather than dismissing someone outright. Her Aunt Patricia looked at his shoes and made a small sound that Emma had never heard her make before, which was no sound at all. Dinner moved the way Christmas dinners do, loudly and warmly, and with several conversations happening at the same time. He talked football with her father and listened to her Aunt's long story about the neighborhood association with genuine patience. When Carol started describing the venue they had chosen for the wedding with that particular brightness that was really a form of measuring, he turned to Emma with a look that was so openly fond that Carol actually stopped talking mid-sentence. Emma felt her face go warm. She reminded herself it was performance. They had agreed on that in the sandwich place. Natural behavior for a believable couple. But when he touched her hand under the table, during one of her aunt's more pointed questions, it did not feel like performance. It felt like something steadier than that. Something with actual weight. After dinner, her grandmother rose to go sit on the porch despite the cold, and Emma followed her out, and her grandmother sat in the wooden chair she always sat in, and said without looking up that the young man inside reminded her of someone she could not quite place. Emma said she did not think so. Her grandmother said that was fine, but that the way he looked at Emma, when Emma was not looking, reminded her of something she had seen a long time ago. And it was the look of a person who already knew. Emma did not ask what she meant by that. She went back inside and found him, helping her mother carry dishes to the kitchen. And her mother was laughing at something he had said. And the scene was so comfortable and ordinary that Emma stood in the doorway. For a moment before he noticed her, he met her eyes across. The room and the expression on his face was very still and very clear. On the way home, he drove slowly through streets that glittered with lights, and Emma looked out the window and thought that she should feel relieved that it had gone well. She felt something else instead, something that did not have a clean name. He pulled up in front of her building and turned the engine off and sat quietly for a moment, and then said that there was something he needed to tell her. She looked at him. He said his name was not Ben. He said his name was Sebastian Ford. He said that 5 years ago she had worked at a diner called the Sunrise on Clement Street, and he had been a graduate student who ate there 3 mornings a week because it was cheap and the coffee was good. He said he had tried to talk to her once, and she had been polite but busy, and he had understood. He said he had thought about that morning more times than made any reasonable sense. Emma was very still. She said she remembered the sunrise. She said she did not remember him. He said he knew. He said he had been different then. Thinner, quieter, wearing old glasses, and a coat that did not fit. He said that was not an excuse for using a different name. He said he had not known how to explain and had made the wrong choice. She got out of the car. She did not say goodbye. She walked up the stairs to her apartment and sat on the edge of the bed, and her coat and her heart was beating very fast, and she did not know yet whether she was angry or something else entirely. Emma did not sleep well. She lay in the dark of her studio apartment, listening to the city outside and turning the name over in her mind the way you turn a coin in your fingers. Sebastian Ford. It was a different kind of name than Ben. It had weight to it. It sat differently in the mouth. She tried to remember the Sunrise Diner on Clement Street, which she had worked at for 14 months when she was 21. And she could remember the sticky laminate tables and the smell of bacon grease in the morning, and the way the early light came through the east-facing windows in winter. She could remember the regulars by their orders more than their faces. She could not find them there no matter how carefully she looked. That bothered her more than she expected it to. She got up at 6 because there was no point in lying there any longer, and made coffee and sat at the Toad, small table by the window, and watched the street. A sanitation truck moved slowly through the snow. A man walked a dog that kept stopping to investigate every lamppost. The world was going about its business with perfect indifference to the fact that Emma Lawson had brought a fake boyfriend too. Christmas dinner, and discovered he was someone she had already met and already forgotten. Her phone had 7 messages. 3 from her mother, who had apparently gone home and immediately needed to share every thought she had ever had about Sebastian. Her mother called him wonderful and said Gerald had told her privately that he liked the young man, which her mother wrote in capitals, because Gerald liking anyone was a significant event. There was a message from Carol that simply said, "Call me when you wake up," in a tone that Emma could read even through text. There was a message from her Aunt Patricia that contained the phrase, "He seems substantial," which from Patricia was essentially a marriage proposal on Emma's behalf. And there were 2 messages from a number she did not have saved. The first said that he was sorry for not telling her sooner. The second said that he understood if she did not want to respond, and that he would not push. Emma put her phone face down on the table. She went to her morning shift at the Blue Kettle and moved through it mechanically, refilling cups and taking orders and smiling at the regulars who wished her a happy day after Christmas. Her manager, Gloria, was 53 and had worked in restaurants for 30 years and had the particular wisdom that comes from watching people for a very long time, looked at her around 9 in the morning and said she looked like someone who had received complicated news. Emma said she supposed that was accurate. Gloria said that complicated news that kept a person up all night was usually the kind that mattered. She said, "Uncomplicated news let you sleep." Fine. Emma thought about that while she refilled the coffee station. Her shift ended at noon, and she walked home through streets that were quiet in the particular way of the day after Christmas. Shops half open, families still digesting, the city running at a lower frequency than usual. When she turned the corner onto her block, she stopped. Sebastian was standing outside her building. He was wearing the same dark coat from the night before, and he looked like he had slept about as well as she had. He was not on his phone. He was just standing there, hands in his pockets, watching the snow. He saw her and did not move toward her. He waited. She walked up to him and stopped a few feet away and said that he could have just called. He said he had tried that approach and it had not felt like enough. She looked at him for a long moment. In the daylight, without the soft lamp glow of the restaurant and the warmth of the dinner table, he looked different, but not in the way she had expected. He looked more real. The tiredness around his eyes made him more real. She said they should go inside because it was cold. They sat in her apartment, her on the small couch and him in the chair she used mostly for stacking laundry, which she had hurriedly cleared before he sat down. She made tea because it gave her hands something to do, and she set a mug in front of him and sat back and said he should explain the full version, no shortcuts. He said he had grown up in a small town in Connecticut, the kind of town people leave when they are 18 and do not return to except at holidays. His father had run an insurance office and his mother had taught 4th grade. They were good people who worked steadily and expected the same from him. He had come to the city for university on a partial scholarship and had spent 5 years being the kind of a student who studied in the library until midnight and ate cheap food and did not go to parties because parties were expensive and loud and he had not known how to be in them. He said the Sunrise Diner had been important to him in a small way. It was warm and cheap and no one rushed him. He had gone 3 mornings a week and eaten scrambled eggs and drunk coffee and read and felt for an hour. Like the city was manageable, Emma was watching him carefully. He said that she had worked the morning shift on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturday. He said she had been the kind of person who remembered how people liked their coffee without being asked twice, and who laughed at things that were actually funny rather than performing laughter, and who moved through a busy room with a kind of practical grace that he had found remarkable. He said he had tried to say something real to her exactly once and had done it badly. It was nervous and too quick, and she had been kind about it but clear. He said he had stopped going after that, not out of anger, but because it had seemed like the honest response to a situation he had misread. Emma said she wished she remembered him. He said it was all right that she did not. She said it was not all right, actually. She said she had been 21 and stretched thin across 2 jobs and a class she was trying to finish, and she had not been paying attention the way she should have been paying attention to people. She said that was something she had thought about in general. Not about him specifically because she had not remembered him, but about that whole period of her life and the way she had moved through it with her head down. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said that he had not told her his real name because he had not known how to walk up to a woman in a park and say that he was the person she had politely dismissed 5 years ago, and that he would like a second chance at making an impression. He said it had seemed like a door that was closed. And then she had been standing there in the snow talking to herself about needing help, and it had felt like a window that was open, and he had made the wrong choice about how to go through it. Emma wrapped both hands around her mug. She asked him what he actually did. Not the teacher answer, the real one. He said he ran a company called Ford Digital Solutions. He said it built software platforms for school districts, tools that helped teachers track student progress and identify kids who were struggling early enough to actually help them. He said he had started it with a business partner 6 years ago in a tour room office in the South End with second-hand computers, and had spent 3 years barely making payroll. He said it had grown. She asked what grown meant. He said it meant they had offices in 4 cities now and employed 230 people, and last year had signed contracts with school systems in 11 states. Emma set her mug down very carefully. She said that she had brought a billionaire to Christmas dinner and told her family he was a software teacher. He said he was not a billionaire. She said that was not the part that was the point. He almost smiled. She could see him stopping himself because the moment was not quite right for it yet. That restraint made her trust him slightly more than she had 30 seconds before. She asked him why he had agreed to $5. He said that when she had stood there in the snow and offered $5 with complete seriousness, like she had done the math and that was the number and she was not apologizing for it, he had thought she was the most honest person he had encountered in a long time. He said his world had become one where people negotiated and postured and presented versions of themselves calibrated for effect. He said $5 had been refreshing. Emma looked at him sitting in her laundry chair in her small apartment, with his expensive coat folded over his knee, and she thought that the whole situation was so strange, so specific that it could not have been invented. That was the thing about real life. It did not have the clean shape of a story. It was lumpy and coincidental, and it made you feel things in the wrong order. She said she needed him to understand something. She said she was not interested in being someone's project or someone's charity or someone's interesting contrast to the world he lived in. He said he understood that. She said she was serious. He said he knew she was serious. He said that was the thing about her that had been apparent from the beginning, in the park and at the sandwich place and at the dinner table. He said he had not come back here this morning to offer her something. He had come to be honest and to accept whatever she decided. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said that her family was going to be very confused. When they found out the truth about who he was, he said he imagined they would be. She said her mother was going to call her within the hour regardless of what happened between them, because her mother operated on a schedule that was indifferent to other people's dramatic moments. He said that was probably accurate. She said that her grandmother had told her last night that he looked at her in a particular way. She said she had not known what her grandmother meant and had not asked. Sebastian did not say anything to that. He just looked at her in the way that apparently her grandmother had already noticed and catalogued with 80 years of accumulated observation. Emma felt something settle in her chest. Not a dramatic feeling, not the kind that arrived with music. Just a quiet shift, like a room where someone has opened a window and the air changes. She said that if they were going to do this, meaning the real version of this, she needed it to be slow. She needed to know him the way you actually know a person, which takes time and ordinary days and disagreements about small things and all the undramatic evidence that someone is who they say they are. He said that sounded exactly right to him. She said she was still going to charge him the $5. He said he would consider it an investment. She laughed then, a real one, and he smiled the way he had smiled at the sandwich place, without any performance in it, and outside the window, the December snow was still coming down over the city, and the sanitation truck had moved on to the next block, and the dog walker had gone home, and the world was still going about its business, but inside the small apartment something had begun that was true and unhurried, and for the first time in a long while, exactly what it appeared to be. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Emma looked at Sebastian, and he raised his eyebrows slightly. Waiting, she answered and said, "Hello, Mom," and her mother immediately asked when she was bringing Sebastian to dinner again. Because Gerald had mentioned it twice already, and that was essentially Gerald begging. Emma looked across the small room at the man in the laundry chair and said she thought they could probably arrange something the new year arrived the way New Year's always do. Quietly at first, and then all at once, Emma stood in her mother's kitchen. On the evening of December 31st, helping Linda arrange platters of food while the rest of the family moved through the house in the particular pleasant chaos of a gathering that had been anticipated for weeks. Her father Gerald was in the living room with her Uncle Raymond arguing about something on television. Her sister Carol was setting the table with the focused energy of a person who believes that perfectly folded napkins communicate something important about character. Her cousin Ben, not the name she was thinking of when she heard it now, was showing his girlfriend photographs on his phone in the corner, and Sebastian Ford was standing in the hallway. Talking to her grandmother, Emma watched them from the kitchen doorway. Her grandmother Dorothy was 91 years old and had the sharp, unhurried attention of someone who had long since stopped wasting it on things that did not deserve it. She was looking up at Sebastian with an expression Emma recognized as serious interest, and Sebastian was leaning slightly toward her in the way tall people do when they genuinely want to hear someone who is speaking quietly. Emma's mother appeared beside her and said softly that she had never seen Dorothy talk to any young person that long voluntarily. Emma said she had noticed. Her mother touched her arm and said she was glad. It's just that. Glad. And then she went back to the stove, because Linda expressed most of her deepest feelings through the timely management of food. It had been 6 days since Sebastian had sat in the laundry chair in Emma's apartment and told her everything. In those 6 days they had seen each other 3 times. Once for coffee that lasted for hours. Once for a walk along the waterfront. In the cold that lasted 2 hours and ended at a noodle shop, where they stayed another 2 hours after that. And once when he had come to the Blue Kettle at the end of her shift and sat at the counter drinking coffee and reading something on his phone while she finished her closing tasks. And when Gloria had seen him, she had looked at Emma with an expression that required no translation. Each time Emma learned something new. She learned that he had a habit of reading 3 books at once and rotating between them depending on his mood. She learned that he could not cook anything more complicated than eggs and took this as a personal failure. She learned that he had started his company because he had grown up watching his mother spend her own money every year buying supplies for her classroom, because the school budget did not cover them, and that this had lodged in him like a splinter, and eventually become the engine of everything he built. She learned that he was funny in a dry, quiet way, that you had to be paying attention to catch. She was paying attention. The truth about who he was had come out to her family in stages. The way these things do, Carol had figured it out first through Brandon, who had seen something in a business publication, and Carol had called Emma and been uncharacteristically speechless for approximately 40 seconds before recovering and saying that Emma was apparently full of surprises. Her father had been told by Emma directly, sitting with him at the kitchen table over coffee, and Gerald had been quiet for a long moment and then said that the man had seemed decent, and that the money was beside the point as long as that remained true. Her Aunt Patricia had found out through Carol and had called Emma 3 times in one afternoon, each call slightly more effusive than the last. Her grandmother Dorothy had simply said, when Emma had sat with her and explained everything from the park to the laundry chair, that she had known something was not quite straight about the story. She said she had known it the way you know when a picture on a wall is slightly tilted. She said it did not particularly matter because the boy's eyes had been honest even when his name was not Dot. Emma had not known what to say to that, so she had just held her grandmother's hand for a while. Now Sebastian crossed the hallway and found his way to the kitchen doorway and stood beside Emma, and said that her grandmother had just told him that he had good bone structure and should not waste it. Emma said that was actually one of the more romantic things her grandmother said to people she approved of. He looked at her. She looked at him. He had learned not to push past what she was ready for, and she had learned that this patience was not strategy, but actual character. And knowing that made it easier to stand close to him, without the low-level wariness she had carried into most things for a long time. Dinner at Linda's table was loud and warm and punctuated by her Uncle Raymond telling a story about a road trip that got longer and more improbable each time he told it. Sebastian sat across from Emma and next to Gerald, and at one point her father leaned over and said something to him quietly, and Sebastian nodded, and her father nodded back, and Emma did not know what had been said, but the shape of it looked like an agreement. Carol, who had spent the week processing the revelation about Sebastian's actual life with the thoroughness of someone reviewing a legal document, leaned across the table during the main course and said that she had looked up 4 digital solutions and that the work they did in underserved school districts was genuinely impressive. She said it in the careful tone of a person who is offering something real but is not yet comfortable being fully open about it. Sebastian said thank you and meant it simply, without expanding or performing modesty. And Carol looked at him for a moment and then looked at Emma with an expression Emma had never seen on her sister's face before, something uncomplicated and warm. After dinner, the family moved to the living room, and Gerald turned on the television for the countdown coverage, and Linda brought out the dessert she had been preparing since the morning. Emma sat on the small couch near the window, and Sebastian sat beside her, and the room was full of noise. Her family was doing what her family did, which was exist in each other's company with the particular combination of irritation and love that only families achieve. And Emma felt it all around her like something she had not known she was missing until right now. Her grandmother sat in the armchair across the room and caught Emma's eye and gave her a small nod, the kind that meant she saw what was happening and found it satisfactory. Outside the window, the city was beginning to get noisy with the approach of midnight. Distant voices and the first early fireworks somewhere across the water. Emma looked out at it and thought about the park bench and the $5 and the man she had not remembered from the Sunrise Diner on Clement Street and the strange, lurching route that had brought all of it here to this room. Sebastian said quietly that she had gone somewhere in her head. She said she was just thinking about how things happen. He said, what about it? She said that she had spent a long time moving through her days with her head down, managing the next thing and then the next thing, and that she had not been looking up enough to notice what was around her. She said she thought that was probably how you miss things. Not through bad luck, but through the angle of your attention. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said that he had walked past that park 3 times a week for 2 years, and she had been sitting on that bench exactly once, and he had happened to be passing it Exactly the moment she was talking to the winter sky about fake boyfriends. She said that was either meaningful or absurd. He said it was possibly both. The television in the corner began the countdown and the room got louder. Her uncle Raymond joining in with great enthusiasm at 10. Her cousin's girlfriend laughing at something. Her mother reaching for her father's hand in the unself-conscious way of people who have been doing that for 30 years. Emma counted with them quietly, without moving much. When midnight arrived, the room erupted in the small domestic explosion of a family New Year. Hugs and cheers and her Uncle Raymond saying something no one could hear over the noise. Emma turned and Sebastian was looking at her with that expression her grandmother had identified and catalogued with 91 years of accumulated wisdom. She said, "Happy New Year." He said it back. Just those words. But the way he said them made them mean more than the calendar. She did not look away, and neither did he. And the room was full of her family being themselves. Around them and outside the city was crossing into something new, and Emma Lawson, who had sat on a park bench in December with $5 and a feeling of total defeat, understood that the thing she had thought was an ending had been, in the particular stubborn way of real life, a beginning all along. Her mother appeared and kissed her on the cheek and said that this was a good new year. She could feel it. Emma looked across the room at her grandmother, who was watching with quiet satisfaction. She looked at Gerald, who was tolerating her uncle's celebratory handshake with the expression of a man who had made his peace with Raymond years ago. She looked at Carol, who was leaning against Brandon, and for once, not measuring anything against anything else, she looked at Sebastian. She said yes to her mother. She said she thought so too, and she meant it the way you mean something. You are not performing hope, but actually feeling it, solid and specific. And finally, after a long time of keeping her head down and her expectations low and her heart carefully managed, hers